So with that, we are delighted and honored to introduce the Honorable Charlie Baker, Governor of Massachusetts. And we know that he shares our vision completely in helping clients get good jobs, keep those jobs, and most importantly, make progress in a career. So please welcome the Honorable Charlie Baker.
Kate Walsh asked me on the way in how the other guy looked. That's usually the kind of question I get from people who are a little rougher around the edges than you are. So first of all, let me just congratulate you, where's Susan, on 10 years of success. And there are a couple things that people talked about this morning that I'd like to spend a minute on. And the first one starts with this notion of mentoring. You know, people have asked me for years and years and years, you know, where do you go to get your best advice? And that answer for years and years and years has been the same. I talk to my mom and my dad. Those have been my go-to mentors, advisors, guardians, overseers, geniuses when it comes to almost anything that's involved a tough call or a big decision in my life. And the reason for that was pretty simple. They're both wicked smart. My mom's a Democrat, my dad's a Republican, so I'm always going to get the full picture. And I knew that whatever question I put before them, there would never be any spin on the answer, right? The answer was just always going to be what they thought made the most sense and was in the best interest for their son. And I always kind of took that for granted. They were just always there. Always. Whatever the circumstance of the situation, they were just always there. And they were, as I said before, wicked smart. So the kind of advice and guidance that I would get from them, sort of money in the bank. Now, I spent 20 years as a big brother to the same young man. He's now 51. Which is hard to believe since I'm still 25. But I wrote a letter to the Big Brother Association when I was a freshman in college and just said, I have time on my hands, I'm looking for something to do. Is there some way I can volunteer? And they said, well, you know, if you're 17, you can actually be a big brother. So I went over and I interviewed, and I met John, who at that time was 11, and spent a ton of time with him for the better part of the next 2 decades. But it was the first time I'd really been around somebody who didn't have, I mean, around them a lot, who didn't have the same kind of support system and sort of human infrastructure that I had when I was growing up. And I became, in some respects, kind of the guy he went to for advice about all kinds of things. And I ended up playing kind of the same role for him that my parents had played for me. And I remember thinking at the time that while I really enjoyed it, it taught me a valuable lesson about how big a gap there is in someone's life if they don't have people like that they can go to. Now, whether it's a big brother or a big sister or a coach or a teacher or a neighbor or whoever it happens to be, everybody needs somebody. I don't care who you are or where you're from, who's your fan, who's going to be there for you, whatever it is and whenever it is, and is going to help you play whatever hand it is you get dealt. And for a lot of people, that's the difference between a foot and a mile. And when I listened to Susan talk about what this program was all about, and I listened to Daenerys talk about her story, And I listen to Art talk about the power of those interviews and the feedback that comes from that. What you're doing, most of all, is you're providing somebody with that basic, fundamental guidance that's not there for everybody, that a lot of us just take for granted. And on some level, that's a huge piece of why this organization has stood the test of time and been so successful. And when I listen to Daenerys' story, I gotta tell you, there's one other element in this which just pours through. You have grit. Real grit. And the reason why I say that, it takes a certain kind of personality to just never stop running. You know, my wife and I, we have 3 kids, and we hope we play the same role for them that my parents and our parents played for each other and for us. But there's that thing we always say to our kids, which came out of Finding Nemo, one of the truly great American cultural artifacts. Just keep swimming, right? That's what Dory said. Much easier said than done. Much easier said than done. And part of what Career Collaborative does, through that mentor program especially, is it makes it possible for people who have grit to share in that experience of just keep swimming. You're going somewhere. We're here to help. We'll be there for you. But we want to help you keep moving forward. And that sense of momentum and purpose, which has to be self-generated, but desperately needs always to be reinforced by somebody at some point along the way, is a killer combination. If you put it in a software program, it'd be a killer app, right? And that's a big part of why I think you win. I spent a bunch of years with Bottom Line, which was another organization that was all about mentorship. You know, Bottom Line was started by some people who couldn't understand why first-generation college kids in Boston had so much trouble completing college. They had completion rates in the 30s. Smart kids, usually graduated somewhere near the top of their class. They just couldn't get through school. They figured out, first of all, that they weren't getting very good advice about where to go. So a lot of them just picked the wrong place to begin with. They didn't have somebody to help them figure out the Byzantine and bizarre nature of financial aid and student aid, which is easily way more complicated than anything I ever saw in healthcare, okay? Or government, which is saying something. And they didn't have anybody they could talk to about all the issues that come up when you go off to this new environment called school. And by simply creating a program that would help kids pick the right school, understand what the financial opportunities were, and then help them play the hand all the way through, they took a graduation rate that was in the 30s and put it into the 80s. This is a very special model. I don't know how you came up with it, Susan, but it's a very special model. And it builds on some elements that have been proven over and over and over again in a variety of different settings and different walks of life. But it all gets back to this fundamental notion People need champions, they need fans. They need guidance, they need support. And if you can sort of put the formula together, you can help the Daenerys's of the world do great things and go great places, so that her kids can do great things and go great places. And that's why Ron and I, you were late, bud. You're talking to Molly, okay. She's tough. But that's why we're both so pleased and so thrilled to be here today, and so anxious to be part of the next act in job training, workforce development here in the Commonwealth. One final note, when I attended my first National Governors Association meeting in February in Washington, there was like 40 of us, we were sitting in a room. A woman who was moderating this event on economic development went around the room and asked every person, every governor who was there, to say what their #1 impediment to economic development was. I said snow. Seriously. I am totally scarred by last winter forever. And I thought it would be some combination of, healthcare costs, energy costs, regulatory policy, tax policy, kind of the stuff you usually hear people talk about. A couple of the people early on said skill building. And that literally kind of lit the room on fire. I mean, 40 governors, I would say 35 of them said skill building was their single biggest impediment to economic growth. The ability to create operating models, to create programs, to create support systems that could help people get the skills that they would need to qualify for and be able to do the jobs that were available out there. Which is why when I came back from that, I said to Ron and to Jim Pizer, who's the Education Secretary, and Jay Ash, who's the Economic Affairs Secretary, you three guys need to get together and figure this out. Because we have this new federal law that's going to give us an opportunity to be way more flexible than we've ever been before with respect to how we do workforce development, job training, and skill building. And it is a really big deal, not just here, but everywhere. And we've got to come up with demand-side models that work. So the opportunity to be here today and share with you a model that works is a real treat for both of us. And Daenerys, we look forward to watching you continue to succeed at that great institution that you're part of. Right, Kate? Right, okay. And Susan, yeah. And Susan, congratulations on all you've accomplished. It's a real pleasure for us to be here. Thank you very much.